What's up, everyone? It's Comrade number 3, and today on my channel, we're talking about why Karl Marx is badass. And if you want to be badass too, check out this new Karl Marx themed store called The Class Division, the sponsor for this video. They were kind enough to make this video financially possible, so go check out their killer Marx merchandise like Karl Marx the t-shirt, Karl Marx the coloring book, Karl Marx the lunchbox, Karl Marx the breakfast cereal, Karl Marx the flamethrower. The kids love this one. Head over to their website and use code COMRADE3 to get 20% off your purchase. And while you're at it, give me a like, smash that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, leave me a comment, share the video to your feed, check out my website, sign up for my newsletter, purchase something from my online store, click my Amazon affiliate links, tell your friends about me, organize my closet, wash my car, clean my windows, pick up my dry cleaning, do my grocery shopping, feed my cats, paint my second bedroom, cancel the 3-ring circus, fix the leaky faucet in my kitchen, tend my garden, and call my grandma. She would love to hear from you. So let's get into it. Karl Marx is in. Exploitation is out. Wage slavery is out. The family out. Capitalism out. And bad. And evil. More and more people are realizing that Marx was right, and that they're the only person who realizes Marx was right. And what better way to show everyone that you're better than them than a Karl Marx Funko Pop, available in this month's Marx Crate, which I'll be posting my review and unboxing in a couple of days, so look out for that. We Marxists are the only smart, good people out there. And I'm the best one because look at my fucking room. It's absolutely covered in Marx shit I bought, which is how you know I'm a real Marxist. And I'll include affiliate links in the description for all of it. By following me and doing exactly what I do, you can be a real Marxist too. You see, we're a special breed, dear viewer. Marx definitely would have agreed with everything we have to say because he was a super cool dude with a super chill beard. You don't even have to read anything he wrote. For me, it was one look and then I was like, I'm with Marx. Or hey, read it all. If you think reading is important, so do I. I'll read anything if I can act like I'm the center of the universe and make it impossible for ordinary people to identify with me. We belong on a pedestal, my fellow real Marxists. Hell, our heads should be after Mao's on that thing with all their heads. Getting worried I'm satirically saying you're the bad guy if you own a Marx t-shirt yet? Well, don't fret, dear viewer. I'm not. It's just that Live Marx, the official outdoor active brand of Marxists, is not going to advocate for itself. There's a way to live Marx, folks, and my job is selling it. That means sanding down the corners and making it fun for everyone, and let me tell you, I'm good at it. On the one hand, I can sell Marx to discontented people who don't know what he actually said, and on the other, I can sell Marx to serious bookworms who value the fine print. How do I do it? More importantly, how do I do it without inciting a revolution? I mean, you saw how mad they got about the PlayStations. That guy got fucking arrested. I got money to make. But don't fret, dear viewer. It's actually much easier to sell Marx than you might expect. If someone doesn't know what Marx actually said, then I just tell them whatever they want to hear. And if someone does know what Marx actually said, I point them at one of the people who doesn't to argue with, causing everybody to want to show everyone else their Marx. It becomes a Marx measuring contest, a Marx-off, and as a consequence, they all buy more Marx. Cha-ching! I mean, how else are we supposed to measure anything in our society? It's by how much we consume. And buying a book can either be to read it and put it on a shelf, or just to put it on a shelf. Either way, it looks exactly the same to other people, and competitive consumption needs to be visible. It's a symbol, a signal. And against all expectations, Karl Marx, long dead German critic of capitalism, whose work should absolutely help people become aware of these dynamics and protect themselves from them, works the same way. And it doesn't have to be Marx merch at all. Ideally, for me, a fictional Marx influencer, peddling affiliate links, like actually peddling affiliate links, like look in the description. Tell me you're not tempted to buy any of this stuff. It's really, the links are really there. It's all going to come from China, so be prepared to wait. But ideally, for me, it would be merch. But it doesn't even have to involve monetary transactions at all, to be clear. A person can want revolution while accidentally supporting the very order they want to overturn. It involves how people see themselves, how they want others to, and how the ruling order controls every mediating force through which we learn and express these things. So, you gonna buy something?
Your own personal Marxist. Someone who goes through books, allegedly looks. Your own personal Marxist. Someone to get you mad, your neighbor is bad. Leave a comment down below telling me just how bad your neighbor is. Man, that guy's pride flag doesn't have all the other shit on it. What? Cancelled! He's a Nazi! Feeling so down cause the memes you've done on. Scroll at home on your telephone. Follow me on Twitter, I'll make you a believer. Or whatever. Is that a porn site? Yeah. The working class rise up as a mass. That'd be the best. Subscribe and share this. Society to hither, the state could maybe wither. And that's why China is bad, not because they're an opponent of the US. I read Marx, you donate. Quick note, I may or may not have actually read Marx though. I read Marx, you donate. And whether I did or didn't doesn't really matter as long as I say I did and I get paid. Your own personal Marxist. Someone to say the things like seize the memes. Your own personal Marxist. Someone who says you're smart cause you like Marx. You are correct about everything and everyone else is wrong. I read Marx, you donate. Hey, so are you a conservative or a liberal? Well, I'm a conservative. Oh, cool. Did you know that Karl Marx hated trans people? No, I've changed my mind. I'm actually a liberal. Whoa, that's great because Karl Marx loves trans people. Feeling oppressed by the bourgeoisie. Misery, she loves company. Well, you are complaining, I'll do some great explaining. Yeah, for whatever reason, love it or hate it, queer shit matters more than anything. My content delivers, become Patreon giver. I hate both the left and right, but I really care about how one of them sees me. I read Marx, you donate. And you know what? It's not really whether or not I know everything about Marx. I could know everything about Marx. I read Marx, you donate. Hell, I could be Karl Marx himself as long as I'm following the influencer paradigm. I read Marx, you donate. And the kicker is if I don't follow it, no one will pay attention to me. I read Marx, you donate. So even if I have good intentions, they're gonna be co-opted. I read Marx, you donate. It's really a clusterfuck. That's what I'm gonna tell you about this thing. I read Marx, you donate.
"1955 was a grim year. The sinking of the passenger ship SS Andrea Doria, a gas explosion at a coal mine in Japan that killed hundreds, political crisis in British Guiana."
World attention focuses on Georgetown, the elegant and spacious capital of British Guiana, as the British government takes action to halt the growth of communism in the country. At his residence, the governor, Sir Alfred Savage, here with his wife, directs the maintenance of law and order in the country, now that the Constitution has been suspended.
Disneyland. The list of tragedies goes on. Some would be corrected later, such as when Disney World, a much better theme park, was opened in Orlando, Florida in 1971. But others weren't corrected. 1955 marked the start of the Vietnam War, a proxy war to try to stop the spread of communism in the East. North Vietnam was supported by the USSR and China, while the United States and capitalist allies supported South Vietnam. 10 years later, in 1965, the US sent troops. A lot of them.
This war is famous for being more hated than Zoolander 2, and there were three primary reasons for this. First, the obvious one, holy hell, it was wrong in every possible way. Over 3 million Vietnamese people died, and 2/3 were innocent civilians. 2/3! Secondly, and maybe more immediately apparent to everyday citizens, was that people were being drafted to go do that killing. That is, the US state was mandating people to go shoot up this tiny country that was trying to transition into a higher mode of production. And wouldn't you know it, the draft targeted members of historically marginalized groups and the lower rungs of the working class. And third, Zoolander 2 is just a movie. Who cares? If a movie's bad, do something else.
During the 1960s, many notions of the Western world drastically changed. By 1970, the majority of the American public thought the Vietnam War was a mistake, and had thought it was a mistake for about 2 years. That majority was snowballing too, and a fervent anti-war movement had sprung up. People weren't happy, but the war wasn't ending. Against this backdrop, in 1971, a man named Bill Backer of the McCann Erickson Advertising Agency and his creative team came up with what many considered to be the most popular commercial of all time.
I'd like to buy the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves. I like to teach the world to sing with me. Perfect harmony, perfect harmony. I like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company. That's the real thing. I like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony, perfectly. And I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company. It's the real thing.
Now, it would be easy to call this cynical, and on the corporate level, where the budgets originate and distribution happens, it certainly is. That said, I don't actually think the individuals responsible had the intention of erasing the seriousness of war from a message of peace. Their job was to sell Coca-Cola, and people really love this commercial.
As someone who loathes advertising, I have to say that was a great commercial.
I was thinking about how I love to make others happy and this song popped into my head. I love this commercial forever. Peace, love, and blessings to all of you.
What really gets me of this commercial is the first verses in the lyrics. I want to buy the world a home and furnish it with love. Beautiful. The man or woman who composed this was a genius. Just what I needed in these times of hate and violence seemed to be the rule. We still have a chance, but we must start now. Tomorrow might be too late.
The best commercial ever brings tear to my eyes today.
So assuming Backer and company weren't just straight up villains, they probably wanted to make something people enjoyed while fulfilling the conditions of their job. Backer's story behind the song is that it was inspired when a flight he was on had to be grounded due to intense fog, adding a full-day layover to the itinerary. The frustrated passengers gathered in the airport lounge the following morning, greeting each other and sitting down to talk over coffee, tea, and Coca-Cola. Backer felt having a Coke was a means to initiate a connection.
It was a simple observation of the product performing one of the functions it does so well. It's a social catalyst. It's one of the best ads I've ever written about the product answering a need. There's a need all over the world for some kind of a signal that says, let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's go have a Coke. If you want to communicate with people, there's nothing better.
Though we should be conscious that we're taking a marketer at his word, it would look fucked up to call this nefarious, at least on the individual level. Backer, who died in 2016 of complications from colon cancer surgery, was also pretty humble about his involvement, nostalgic, eager to credit other people that were involved, and came off pretty genuine. a far cry from the cynical and complicated Don Draper, who is implied to have created this commercial in the fiction world of Mad Men.
Yeah, I'm proud of having co-created. I didn't do it all by myself, but it's generally considered the world's most popular commercial, and anybody is proud to be associated with something that's popular, and people like to be liked. And as far as I know, the commercial ran in almost every country of the world that speaks English, and they all understood it, that it was a product saying we can be a little social catalyst that can bring people together, talk things over, and sometimes communications get better if you're just sitting over a bottle of Coke and looking people in the eye.
So, we've established I'm not trying to call this old man, who's remembered fondly for making something that's been near universally loved for decades, evil, okay? Understood? Good.
According to Roger Greenaway, one of the musicians involved,
the lyrics to the song, although not overtly anti-war, delivered a message of peace and camaraderie.
That's the trick, though. To be for peace, one must be against war. Also, it's not that cut and dry either. We can't be just purely against every single war, because it would have severe implications to imply that no war has ever been necessary to have peace. The French Revolution was directed at an unjust ruling class, just as the American Revolution was. The American Civil War ended chattel slavery in the United States. The Nazis killed millions of people in the Holocaust, a huge fraction of them simply for being Jewish. Is it peace if a class of elites rules over us, perpetuating injustices? Is it peace if people are enslaved? Were the Nazis peaceful?
So, when a piece of media gets distributed that satiates discontent with war by simply saying peace, a significant piece is left out. I have such a way with words, don't I? I mean, it feels good not to have war, right? I don't want war, so if Coca-Cola's commercial spreads peace, I'll have a Coca-Cola. Finally, a corporation uses its power for good, right? Really furnishes my home with love. The US state has made no formal effort to make up for the Vietnam War.
Idealism is a theory of history and change in which the world is shaped through the thoughts and beliefs that we, as human beings, impose upon it. In simpler terms, idealism declares that changing the world simply results from having a vision. It seems like a sensible worldview because it recognizes the active character of human beings. People devise outcomes and initiate plans to accomplish them, right? However, history doesn't occur because a genius invents the next stage of society and enough people sign on. Idealism goes back to that bitch Plato. In contrast, materialism prioritizes the fact that the physical universe exists and develops with or without human thoughts and desires, and therefore, so does reality. The universe existed before human beings and our ideals, and it will be there after we're all dead. Marx believed idealism was a dead end. We could say the ideal of peace is good and preferable to war, and even outline exactly what peace would look like compared to war. We could go into great detail about how people could go about their business peacefully, cooperate, and stop acting so mean. A majority of people could agree, too. They could all say no to war. But saying peace is good doesn't create peace, nor does agreement lead to action. Further, taking action doesn't guarantee effective change, as action can easily be directed towards ineffective targets. This is what makes idealism, well, ideal for preserving a ruling order.
Bart, stop creating a diversion and get out of here.
It doesn't put forward a material basis for what the ruling order even is, and therefore doesn't have a way of transforming relationships of power. Instead, it's simply selling a vision of utopia by being the change you wish to see.
Which is why I'm YouTubing about Marx. We'll talk about that later, though. For now, let's talk other bullshit merch. Suppose we're looking for an American retail chain specializing in counterculture-related clothing and accessories. It's Hot Topic, right? It has to be Hot Topic. We're going to Hot Topic.
In Hot Topic, we're guaranteed to find t-shirts with anarchy symbols, and we've all seen so-called radicals wearing these things get made fun of in one way or another. They're buying anti-capitalist merch from a company that pulls hundreds of millions in revenue yearly.
I haven't even begun to peak. And when I do peak, you'll know.
Isn't that hypocritical?
Maybe. I mean, it's definitely unbearable, but it's not really their fault either. We're all running around trying to feel good and find meaning in our lives, and it's not exactly made easy in this postmodern dystopia. It's hard to develop a sense of self in our detached society. People who read my books and watch my documentaries probably notice I talk about a concept I came up with called cultivated identity a lot. Maybe too much, actually, like mark your bingo cards. But I'm referring to the process by which the ruling class conditions people to use consumption as the primary means of constructing and expressing their identities, facilitated by media and advertising that serve the ruling class's interests. Identity is cultivated through the ruling ideology. We're seemingly given the choice to be who we want, but it's only from the options on offer. Symbols like the anarchy A are incorporated into the self. We can say whatever we want about what anarchism actually means, but it doesn't matter. What matters is what anarchism means to me.
What democratic socialism means to me.
And when someone owns the means by which we get our information, that information conforms to standards those owners impose. If every reliable source told us the sky was purple our whole lives, then for us, it would be purple. So what anarchism means to me really means what I've been told anarchism means. The sociological concept of recuperation is when ideas and images deemed radical get absorbed and co-opted into mainstream culture, often also becoming consumer products. The effect of the process is that the recuperated concept is interpreted as more neutral or innocuous. Idealist theories of change are particularly vulnerable to this, as again, they exist purely as a concept that people sign on to. So, anarchism. Here's how that works. This person isn't happy. They feel disconnected from society, they're discontent, so they look for something to make life make sense. And for this particular person, that search leads them to anarchism. Now, Google, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Turner Broadcasting, Comcast, Twitter, and whoever else own all the mediating forces between this person and anarchism, so before that person gets connected and informed, they come across a thing, a representation, a concept, an image labeled anarchism that perhaps accurately describes their feelings but doesn't amount to anything more. It seems to be anarchism because that's what normal research led them to. So, to them, this is anarchism. Like I said a moment ago, and also a million other times, we're directed to form identity through aesthetic choices. Who one is derives from what one consumes. In the way a crop is cultivated by a farmer that owns the means to work the land, identity is cultivated by the class that owns the means to present these aesthetic choices. We are the fertile soil in which they plant their ideology. As this person incorporates this recuperated image of anarchism into their identity, questions about their limited knowledge of, say, the history or tenets of anarchism are attacks on who they are. What anarchism means to me is an image sanitized and simplified through mediating forces, intentionally and organically, and is now who I am for this person. Anarchism, in the lifestyle market that is mainstream and social media, isn't a political tradition, it's a rebellious attitude. It may carry aesthetic associations with past movements, but these serve only to legitimize one's ineffective aversions toward a society that seems fundamentally broken.
But hey, that's just anarchism, utopianism, Coca-Cola commercials, and other idealism, right? Karl Marx worked from a material basis, not an idealist one, and you can't deny reality, so this can't happen to Marx, right? Karl Marx described Pierre-Joseph Proudhon's 1846 book, The Philosophy of Poverty, a major theoretical work of anarchism, as, and I quote, bad and very bad at that. He thought it was so bad that he wrote a spicy rebuttal cleverly titled The Poverty of Philosophy in 1847, characterizing Proudhon and his anarchism as a simple repackaging of utopian idealism. Before that, in 1846, he and Friedrich Engels co-wrote The German Ideology, which also criticized anarchist work on hierarchy and the idealism of spontaneous revolution. Instead, Marxists put forward a system of dialectical materialism to scientifically investigate social conditions. And that's why Marxism is invincible. It simply cannot be co-opted.
What makes materialism a more effective analytical perspective than idealism? Is it inherently superior to other worldviews, or are there potential weaknesses that we should consider?
With materialism, physical conditions dictate humanity's actions. The universe and its processes come first. Lucky them, know what I mean?
Idealism is abstract and all about interpretation. Perception of ideas and ideals changes when they're expressed with different agendas. For instance, the word freedom can mean many different things depending on who's saying it, from fighting genuine tyranny to spending decades bombing the hell out of the Middle East for oil.
Remember that? Remember how that was for freedom? How we were spreading freedom in Iraq?
We will defend our freedom. We will bring freedom to others.
Arm Ukraine now to defend freedom.
What I mean by abstract is a subjective expression of the mind, where the phrase beauty is in the eye of the beholder comes from. By tapping into this, a disproportionately powerful ruling class can use their ownership and control over information to shape public consciousness. For example, the base definition of an ideal like what is good is determined by the capitalist ruling class's control of influential organizations through their ownership or support through advertising dollars and donations. This makes the capitalist ruling class's beliefs and values the mainstream ones by virtue of their ability to disseminate and mediate information as they see fit.
So does that mean materialism, where we can verify the existence of something like, I don't know, rocks at the Grand Canyon, is the correct worldview over idealism, where people like Bill Gates, Rupert Murdoch, or George Soros can influence our understanding of reality? Well, not exactly.
Karl Marx had a critical view of earlier forms of materialism. He believed older materialism had a static and deterministic view of reality that was insufficient for comprehending the intricacies of human behavior and society, and he considered that a major failure. The material world isn't composed of fixed, unchanging elements, nor does humanity have no impact whatsoever on it. Everything is in movement and connected. Marx developed a form of materialism that he thought was better than both idealism and old-school materialism because it gave a clearer picture of the dynamic natural world. The word dialectic came before Marx, though. Broadly speaking, a dialectic is when contradictions or opposing forces resolve through conflict, verbal or otherwise. The result negates these contradictions, and their parts are used to build a new whole. So, Marx's idea of dialectical materialism centers around the concept that the universe and reality precede human thought, and that everything is interconnected and constantly changing due to contradicting forces resolving themselves. There are dialectics in society, in nature, and even in the stars.
That doesn't sound right, but I don't know enough about stars to dispute it. No, it's right.
Marx's work was primarily a critique of political economy. Still, like with older materialism, tangible conditions shape how people think and how society is organized. However, these social structures contain contradictions that constitute opposing relationships, which is the primary focus of dialectical materialism.
Before capitalism, the owner of the instruments of labor had himself appropriated the product, because as a rule it was his own product, and the assistance of others was the exception. Now, the owner of the instruments of labor always appropriated to himself the product, although it was no longer his product, but exclusively the product of the labor of others. Thus, the products now produced socially are not appropriated by those who had actually set in motion the means of production and actually produced the commodities, but by the capitalists. The means of production, and production itself, had become in essence socialized. But they were subjected to an outdated form of appropriation, which presupposes the private production of individuals, under which therefore everyone owns his own product and brings it to market. The new mode of production is subjected to this old form of appropriation, although it abolishes the conditions upon which the latter rests. This contradiction, which gives to the new mode of production its capitalistic character, contains the germ of the whole of the social antagonisms of today.
Capitalism's defining contradiction creates conflicting material interests and relationships that can be used to classify people on two opposite ends of a struggle. This makes it dialectical. History is driven by the material interests of opposing classes made up of active and dynamic individuals within the also active material world.
So to recap, idealism is easy to recuperate. Materialism is harder, but Karl Marx's dialectical ass motherfucking materialism is impossible, right? Oh no. No. Not at all, no. Counterintuitively, a market has opened for Marxist content.
All this considered, there are a few basic reasons why someone might not notice the co-option/recuperation of Marxism. 1. Lack of information coming from primary sources. Not having familiarity with Marx and his collaborators' actual work makes it more difficult to recognize when Marxism is being used commercially or superficially. 2. Proliferation and normalization of Marxist symbols and imagery. As Marxism becomes more prevalent in popular culture, or indeed a culture unto itself, it may become seen as just another part of the social landscape rather than something with specific political meaning. 3. Lack of understanding of marketing and ownership of the means to disseminate information. Powerful people in organizations can use Marxist symbols and imagery however they want and without any concern for accuracy, and because they own the platform, they don't have to broadcast opposing information. When the general public is presented primarily with a version of Marxism that's functionally the same as whatever they already know as leftist or progressive,
Kiddo! Champ! Chief!
they're unlikely to make a distinction. Why would they? Let's say someone's first exposure to Marxism is through a public personality like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, or a politician like Ron DeSantis or Ted Cruz. In that case, they might think of Marxism as basically like the Democratic Party, World Economic Forum, and the nonprofit industrial complex, but more aggressive, more anti-growth, more anti-human, more postmodern, and therefore worse. Or maybe their first exposure to Marxism is through a public personality like Luna Oy or Second Thought, or they got linked up to it through a politician like Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They might then think of Marxism as basically like the Democratic Party, World Economic Forum, and the nonprofit industrial complex, but more aggressive, more anti-growth, more anti-human, more postmodern, and therefore better.
But that's not in line with Marx's work at all, and I do know enough about stars to dispute it. Marx advocated for the growth of the productive forces and for unlocking human potential, not for reducing consumption, energy production, and calling people breeders. Can you believe that there's still a big cluster of liberals that do that? But in truth, a lot of people who more or less agree with them realize that it sounds horrible and instead advocate against the more nebulous concept of growth. These people often call themselves Marxists too, and they get away with it because most people see Marxism as just being way more left than Democrats. This is because the Marxism that exists on the mainstream level is just a label for supposedly very progressive people. It's, again, rooted in ideals and morality rather than dialectical struggle and the expansion of the productive forces. As we discussed earlier, none of the big names in Marxism, Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Luxemburg, Dutt, Kollontai, Hampton, Parenti, or Hudson, none of them were idealists. They weren't even Marxists per se, they were dialectical materialists. So anyways, the lack of knowledge or skepticism, the subtlety of the process, and particularly the power of those behind it, make it difficult for many to even notice the co-option and commodification of Marxism, let alone understand it. Further, many so-called Marxist influencers are really doing the time-honored influencer technique of just echoing their loudest followers' opinions. But what about someone who's actually read the shit out of Marx?
There are actually plenty of Marxist influencers who accurately repeat Marxist points. Some even have extensive familiarity with key Marxist theories from prominent figures. But these Marxists often see their task as simply winning people over to Marxism, often with the best intentions. Still, they're retaining a liberal, idealistic mindset rooted in the real fan mindset, essentially running a book club and demonstrating that their knowledge is more than others.
So, economists try to figure out what exactly the value of a thing is. Yeah.
Instead of establishing the cooperative model they desire, they're merely participating in a model of lifestyle curation and competitive expertise. To stand out in a sea of screaming voices, to earn exposure on both traditional and social media platforms, one must establish a reputation for being knowledgeable and compelling. An expert must also have a product to sell if they want any interview opportunities, as most successful podcasts and talk shows are built around lifestyle curation, and recommendation algorithms are ultimately an automated form of the same. Converting people to Marxism is thus two things. Firstly, it's a form of marketing rather than organizing. Secondly, it's utopian, as if one can simply propagandize all those people with the wrong ideas, with bad ideology, into communism.
Society presented nothing but wrongs. To remove these was the task of reason. It was necessary, then, to discover a new and more perfect system of social order, and to impose this upon society from without by propaganda, and wherever it was possible, by the example of model experiments. These new social systems were foredoomed as utopian. The more completely they were worked out in detail, the more they could not avoid drifting off into pure fantasies.
The utopian view is that society presents nothing but wrongs, and that people must be convinced to do what is right. This isn't just ineffective, it's also an elitist worldview where Marxists know the right answers and everyone else is ultimately their lesser, an infant in need of parental guidance. Further, whether from a lack of knowledge or from running accurate knowledge through the lifestyle marketing machine, multiple competing versions of Marxism develop and circulate, making it difficult to determine the authentic version. Ultimately, establishing one's own version as the one true Marxism becomes the end goal of the influencer, rather than engaging in dialectical struggle. Thus, the work of Marx and its successors is put through a process of selective interpretation, where certain aspects are emphasized while others are ignored or downplayed. This establishes lines between people calling themselves Marxists, ultimately market fragmentation. Additionally, individuals or groups might claim to be correctly interpreting and adapting Marx while intentionally not doing so.
Is it really you?
Yes, my dear. I guarantee it. Would I lie?
Simply using an aesthetic to justify their own interests, which deviate heavily.
Fool you!
Again, recuperation refers to making radical idealism more conventional by removing any parts of it that might lead to people making connections to real-world power dynamics and the physical universe. The recuperated sentiment can retain a general dislike of the elites, but it doesn't fully understand how they hold power and control resources. A Marxist understands the relationships between power and production, and a Marxist influencer might even spread this knowledge. But the way they do it, whether intentional or not, is more about promoting a lifestyle and trying to convince people to change their consumption habits. In today's prominent media Marxists, we see the subject of Marx and Engels' critique of utopian socialism, however, with the addition of a mechanical understanding of their theories. Simple possession of this knowledge is not dialectical class struggle. It is not masses of people acting in their interests against the ruling class. It is, however, an information commodity to consume and display as social proof.
Well, I've effectively established myself as the expert on this, right? All that's left to do is to say the baddies' names so people stop consuming their bullshit and switch over to mine. I'm clearly the real Marxist here, right?
I will not let you down.
I obviously get it better than they do, so you should purchase the adaptation of this documentary as a short-form book. Link in the description. I am doing something totally different from them, so says my sales pitch. My criticism is so pointed, my ideas so clear. I am the true contemporary successor to Karl, and you know I mean that because I have not followed the incentives at all. I have done nothing but go against the grain and ingratiated myself to no one. If people listen to me rather than other Marxists, we will indeed have a glorious communist revolution, and soon. Or hey, is this exactly the same goddamn thing I'm criticizing? It is.
Like every word, the word ideology has different meanings depending on the context or perspective of the person using it. In contemporary usage, ideology generally refers to a specific set of beliefs and principles of a particular individual or group, or even society at large. The way people currently use the word doesn't necessarily suggest elites imposing their will on their subjects. This is not how Karl Marx used the term. To him, ideology reflected the particular perspective and interests of the ruling class. Ideology is a means for them, and only them, to justify and legitimize their status and power by denying or complicating the harsh realities of the world. Ideology is crucial to cultivating identity. It is an ideology that choice is analogous to freedom, and that the freedom to choose is the end-all. People are presented with a slew of branded products to choose from, all intended to avoid causing too much controversy or raising critical questions, as that would interfere with the system's reproduction of itself. And, unfortunately, Marxist has become a cultivated identity. In fact, the various factions of Marxism have become competing consumer groups. All right, let's take the IDEO sorter test. IDEO sorter is, in essence, a political quiz that attempts to assign an ideology that matches your views the closest by asking questions based on a flowchart model. The test will sort you into one of 57 different ideologies based on your answers to these questions. Maybe you'll discover something you didn't know about yourself. So let's start. All right, should private property exist? Well, I mean, that's a simplification of the question. Private property means something different today than it did back when Karl Marx was writing. He specifically meant the means of production. A lot of people who say this crap mean different things now, but I'm just going to go with Marx and say no. Should the market mechanism drive the allocation of goods? Ultimately not. Should be rationally planned. The anarchy of production is not something that we want to retain. Should the goal of our society be to move towards a classless, moneyless state society? Yeah. Is a transitory state necessary to reach this goal? Yeah. Should the workers directly own the means of production in this stage, or should the state be in control of them? That's a trick question, because it should be a workers' state. A state that is owned and accountable to the workers, rather than the capitalists. So this is a false dichotomy. I'm going to say state, though. Is a vanguard party necessary to lead the working class in the revolution? I know why it's asking this. If I were to be completely straightforward, I would say no, because we don't really know what's necessary in terms of a working class revolution in 2023. But it's asking this because that's how it happened in the USSR. Like, if I say no, it's gonna sort me into something that's stupid. So I'm just gonna say yes. Should the role of this vanguard party be only to educate, as opposed to being some form of political leadership? Again, false dichotomy. Educating is a form of political leadership, so I guess I'm going to say no, because that's as close to what I said as I think is possible. Should there be a cultural revolution to purge reactionary thought from society? Nope. That would be thought policing, and that's not my thing. Do you think that a multi-generational stage of state capitalism is necessary to prepare the economy for socialism? Again, that's just like saying, is the thing that happened before definitely the thing that has to happen again, which is, I mean, a stupid question. I'm gonna say yes just because it could be, rather than no, it can't be. So I am a Dengist. Socialism with Chinese characteristics is an ideology that deems that a stage of state-managed capitalism is necessary to create the conditions necessary for a successful socialist society. I mean, not wrong. I'm not going to say that's wrong. It's not definitely necessary. Again, that really lacks necessary nuance, because it could be necessary, because man, oh man, is it working for China. I don't know. If I was looking to be called a Dengist/socialist with Chinese characteristics, I'd feel good right now. But wow, does that lack necessary nuance.
So now that the sorting hat has put you into the correct Hogwarts house, you know exactly who to be. You know who to root for and who to hate. You've repeated things you've heard people say on Twitter or X or whatever the fuck it's called now, whether you understood them or not, and you were given an official label. Now you know exactly who you are. Man, life in 2023 is easy. But wait, now that we know everything about ourselves, who do we watch?
A unique selling point, or USP, is a marketing statement that sets a product or brand apart from competitors. It communicates why customers should choose a particular product or brand over alternatives. Developing a strong USP involves understanding the target market, analyzing competition, and identifying customers' values. By leveraging their USP, businesses can attract customers who resonate with their unique offerings. In political discourse, some individuals adopt Marxism not as an analytical framework, but to establish themselves as thought leaders or influencers. However, as more Marxist influencers emerge, simply being a Marxist is no longer sufficient. So, influencers create new, novel theories or interpretations of society to differentiate themselves and gain followers who align with their specific ideas, or the USP. These ideological distinctions, promoted by Marxist influencers, create boundaries and hierarchies within the quote-unquote community. Fans or followers police these boundaries, determining who qualifies as a real fan or a real Marxist based on agreement with the USP. This competitive environment fosters a desire for adherence to a specific ideological line. Adopting Marxism as an aesthetic or identity becomes a form of competitive consumption in the neoliberal lifestyle market paradigm, where choices about these things define who you are. It allows individuals to distinguish themselves and gain social capital. When someone becomes an influencer, it's because they've established a USP by effectively marketing their own line of thought. All that in mind, there are numerous flavors of content creators for the savvy Marxist consumer. There are well-read Marxist influencers. There are billionaire-funded Marxist influencers. There are Marxist influencers who work with a company with a U.S. aid advisory committee member on the board. And there are people that have followers that assume they are Marxist influencers, or something. And that seems to be enough.
The content is working, too. Many people are converting to Marxism. More Americans are calling themselves Marxists than there have been in decades. Well, that's a step in the right direction, right? Well, it would be if what everyone called themselves mattered for even a second outside of their own lives. But just like the meat industry isn't impacted when one of us calls ourselves vegan, identifying as a Marxist only says what niche market one consumes from.
A phrase one spending any time in any circles that are critical of capitalism will eventually hear is, "There is no ethical consumption under capitalism." The exact origin of the phrase is unknown, and regardless of what anyone thinks the original intent is, the frame is limited specifically to consumption.
Think about it. Let's say you're someone who has no idea what any of this shit is, but you go buy some ethically produced groceries and someone says to you, "There is no ethical consumption under capitalism." Two things are going to happen. One, you feel like you're being called out for either buying unethical stuff or being too stupid to know what is and isn't ethical. And two, the frame has changed entirely from production to consumption.
In 1955, John Bugast, then vice president of the Ford Motor Company, introduced the term consumerism as an alternative to capitalism, arguing that the consumer was responsible for driving the economy, not the capitalist. The idea that the consumer is boss and beneficiary of the system works to reinforce the notion that demand is the driving force behind our economy. However, if that were true, we would not live in ad world. Marketing exists to create demand for products that are either in production or have already been produced. Demand actually happens after supply in the vast majority of consumer transactions. Because of this, people often interpret this phrase as implying that consumers are willingly engaging in unethical behavior, making them unethical. The consumer has to work to consume, so the consumer is a worker, and this ultimately places the target on the worker's forehead, not the capitalist's. Not that quote-unquote bad ethics are the driving force behind capitalists' actions, but still, our conversation isn't even approaching the idea that the people who hold the most power might actually be behind the problems that we want to solve.
Oh, but it actually means there are no ethical choices for the consumer. If you want to consume ethically, you can't. Well, congratulations on knowing the secret meaning that contradicts what it sounds like. Next, explain abolish the family for me, would ya? Oh, right. I probably have to explain that one to you because you probably think it just means destroying the nuclear family rather than understanding that the family changes as obligations and relations change. The objective is not to dismantle the family full stop, but to eliminate the imposition of a specific type of family by the current ruling system and its justifying ideologies. But then, that requires knowing that people weren't even saying the nuclear family until about 100 years after Marx was dead, and that neither Marx nor Engels, both German, ever wrote the English word abolish in theory while referring to the family, but rather aufheben, which translated in context means to sublate or supersede, though it can mean several different contradictory things, including abolish. Understanding that Marx and Engels didn't mean abolish in the sense that people using the phrase use it today, though, requires some knowledge beyond the slogan to understand it correctly. There! I know the secret meaning that contradicts what the phrase sounds like. Blah, blah, blah. You're wrong. I'm right. Blah, 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 blah. See how annoying it is?
In saying there is no ethical consumption, critics of capitalism suggest, both intentionally and not, that consumers who are uncritical of the system are inherently bad because consumer demand drives unethical practices. For example, eating meat harms the environment, driving a car kills, and buying goods produced and sold by indigenous communities is somehow considered racist? Yes, really.
There's another definition of consume that has nothing to do with capitalism, though. We consume food and also drink, and we do that to, not die. So to exist in a system that does what it can to blame all of the world's ills on consumption, when at least some form of consumption is necessary, saddles everyone with a bit of an original sin type situation. So everyone's got to have the sickness, because everyone seems to need the cure.
Modern capitalism has established a specific dynamic that allows us to absolve any guilt we might feel for fulfilling our basic human needs such as food, water, and shelter through consumption. A label on a product that says ethical. By countering this label with there is no ethical consumption, we are ultimately ignoring what is actually at play while attacking a person who thinks they're doing the right thing.
You know, when you enter a Starbucks store, it's usually always displayed in some posters their message, which is, yes, our cappuccino is more expensive than others, but, and then comes the story. We give 1% of all our income to some Guatemala children to keep them healthy, for the water supply for some Sahara farmers, or to save the forests, to enable organic growing on coffee, whatever. Now, I admire the ingenuity of this solution. In the old days of pure, simple consumerism, you bought a product and then you felt bad. My God, I'm just a consumerist while people are starving in Africa. So the idea was you had to do something to counteract your pure destructive consumerism. For example, I don't know, you contribute to charity and so on. What Starbucks enables you is to be a consumerist and be a consumerist without any bad conscience, because the price for the countermeasure for fighting consumerism is already included into the price of a commodity. Like, you pay a little bit more and you are not just a consumerist, but you do also your duty towards environment, the poor, starving people in Africa, and so on and so on.
But wait, Starbucks, a massive conglomeration of capital and an institution of the ruling capitalist class, is offering a solution for the same problem anti-capitalists pose? Is Starbucks anti-capitalist? Man, it's too bad all these hot topic anti-capitalists aren't Marxists, right? If they just understood Marx, they could try to tell the ethical consumers out there about how this reinforces all the material relationships that form the dialectical class struggle, right? Starbucks isn't fighting against the relationships or contradictions that define capitalism in its various stages. They're just adopting aesthetics, like the commodified anarchism we mentioned in part 2. Simply an attitude that satiates discontent. I just wanted to throw it down again. You know, it's just plain unethical that instead of consuming Marx, they're consuming other anti-capitalist materials. The Marxists just really need to work to get Marx out there and lead by example. We gotta be the change we wish to see. Hashtag do better. Wait, haven't I repeatedly been saying that doesn't do anything? So why is the ultimate conclusion of this horseshit? Behave differently, individuals. Doesn't anyone get it? Wait, I think I found something.
Peacelandthreads.com. Threads for Reds. Is buying from Peace, Land, and Threads ethical consumption? No, there is no such thing under capitalism. We try to source the shirts as responsibly as possible, but even eco-friendly US-made products contribute to imperialism and the destruction of the environment in one way or another. You should buy the shirt because you like it, not to be ethical.
Well, hey there, that's what I've been saying. It's not wrong to buy stuff and enjoy it. It really isn't. That's why I hate that phrase so much. It leads so many people to think the argument is about how consumers act, and it isn't. So that means this t-shirt company's probably going to cause the revolution, I think.
Hey you hate capitalism, don't you? Of course you do. The very mention of commodity fetishism makes you throw up in your mouth a little. You know what you should do about that? Buy some commodities that tell other people just how much you hate it. Tap in. Ride the wave to Armageddon in style. Well, there's that irony. Somehow, when an obvious problem is disguised with ironic self-awareness, it stops mattering that there's an obvious problem, right? You claim to be anti-capitalist, but you own a store? Oh, you got me.
Okay, not even gonna try. Alright. Like, there's an actual point here to be made about the ownership of the means of production and the socialization of production. Like, an Uber driver is not a member of the bourgeoisie, even if they own the car. They're an employee that owns a tool, even if, legally speaking, they're a small business owner. Law is ideology.
A guy named Swamp Communist on Twitter is the creator of this store, and this guy isn't even really the problem. He doesn't own the means to produce these shirts. They're manufactured by No Sweat, a UK nonprofit, Windjammer Incorporated, a US-based company affiliated with Workers United, and Bella and Canvas, which is certified by the Fair Labor Association. He's just buying shirts made by these companies and reselling them. He owns the means to sell them, but it's doubtful that he employs anyone, so he owns the means but doesn't socialize production. He's a small fry. It's also not that this guy is a grifter or whatever. I mean, he could be. I don't know enough about him to say, and honestly, I don't care. It's that this even exists at all. For this to exist, a market has to have been created for people who just need a little ironic deflection as justification, and they're prime customers in the Marxist lifestyle demographic. The demand for such merchandise has been marketed into existence. Swamp communists didn't do that. The consumer lifestyle mode of operation did.
It's inevitable. Like the large companies dictated this mode of filling up your house to look like a child's bedroom full of toys and merch to validate who you are. Your identity is on display, proving that you are interesting. You must be. You have all this stuff that interests you.
If that's the language these companies have given people to express themselves with, then they've also created an incentive to create content that markets new consumer demographics into existence.
So today I'm going to share my updated tier ranking of all of Marx and Engels' works.
All of this anti-capitalist or even Marxist content on YouTube makes money for content creators like PhilosophyTube, Soros-funded.
That project, dedicated to giving unvaccinated people a voice, was funded with a grant from the Open Society Foundation, which means it was literally paid for by George Soros.
Or Second Thought on Nebula, which again has a USAID member on its board, while also incentivizing people like swamp communists to make some money perpetuating this mode. And making money makes them so bad, right?
And then there's me, Peter Coffin. I started writing this 2 days before Christmas 2022, finished writing in February 2023, and began active production then. I am deliberately spending a lot of time making this content, which some will say I'm alleging is totally useless. Isn't that a little counterintuitive? Well, some dude made a video to that effect, and I'm going to shift to addressing him and that point for a few minutes here. Daniel Torres is going to come when he sees this.
Peter's understanding of elite capture is way too one-dimensional, because even if the online left wanted to sell out, it's not like they could. They already had! These online figures, myself included, aren't revolutionary leftists in the spirit of Che Guevara. We're fucking content creators, and we're very good lapdogs for the elite because of one very important word: ad revenue. You could say every creator on this platform serves the interest of capital because we're all beholden to the almighty dollar.
So, first off, thanks a ton for making this. Like, I'd written a section addressing my own role in this, and I made some of these points, but it was frankly way less effective than that. Lapdogs for the elite, though? I mean, if that's what you want to characterize yourself as, not really what I'm saying, my argument has never been, people make money and that means they serve the interests of capital. Yes, to the extent that we all live in capitalism and need money to interface with it and thus survive, sure, content creators and everyone else out there is beholden to the interests of capital. That is to say, I do also want and need money. But I have a job that isn't this content, though. And I try to do everything possible not to be totally dependent on influencer dynamics, but I'm still doing this, so I still am to some degree. Don't think I don't know that. Like when you like this, comment on it, share it, or buy something, either that I made or through an affiliate link, it does actually very much help me and make my life easier. But it seems like you're arguing with what you want me to have said rather than what I've said.
And fuck, I'm sure Peter has said this before. I have no proof, but it's the kind of thing he'd say, and that again, isn't technically wrong.
Oh, well, that is some pretty clever, plausible deniability there. I gotta give it to you.
I give it to you. You got me there. Right. So...
but even though you're arguing with an imaginary version of me, you notably concede to pretend me's point. In your mind, you really are a lapdog for the elite, which doesn't come off that great.
We're all sellouts because we're chasing the dollar on this website owned by a major tech corporation.
I've never called any of these people a sellout. If you search my Twitter account, my use of the word is either critical of the word sellout or addressing people calling me a sellout, which I absolutely love because the title of this guy's video calls me broke. Like, okay, I'm correct, but it's politically inconvenient for you. And therefore I'm broke rather than incredibly successful, and that means I'm bad. But you, sir, you're happy to call yourself both a sellout and a lapdog for the elite, and dichotomize yourself in opposition to me as somewhat successful at very least, so you're good. Alright.
But that suddenly doesn't mean there isn't any merit to writing or creating political content on Twitch or YouTube.
Okay, what am I, doing right now? If I thought this was a totally useless thing to do with no merit, I wouldn't do it. If a supposedly irrelevant, broke, baddie like me talking about capital and its influence on political content prompts this kind of defensiveness, if you really uncritically think you're a sellout and a lapdog for the elite, and that it's perfectly fine to be those things, maybe it might be a good time to interrogate what I'm saying about capital's influence on a more serious level.
That doesn't mean there isn't merit to taking some form of institutional support and visibility when appropriate, even from figures associated with the US government.
My guy, I don't even think most of these people are directly affiliated with the state. Some probably are, and some provably are. I also don't think too many are directly affiliated with the imperialist capitalist ruling class. Again, some probably are and some provably are. But I think most influencers are just doing exactly what you're doing here. Following market incentives from both a consumption and a production standpoint. Take your praise for H-Bomb and Hassan Abi.
I think creators like Hassan Abi and H-Bomb have done a remarkable job at staying consistent over the years, despite their rise to more mainstream success.
You either like them, want them to notice you, or both. And none of that is because you get ad revenue, because Soros or the US state paid you off, or even that you're a bad person. You see, you're not a sellout, at least not by default. You're a fan, a social climber, or both, which is normal, by the way, because that's what today's ideology wants people to be. And that's the paradigm political content published on major platforms is supposed to be made in, because that helps maintain indifference. Like indifference towards being a lapdog for the elite. Second Thought doesn't just call up US aid for marching orders. He publishes content through Nebula, a company with its own rules it can dictate and contracts that ensure they're followed, which Nebula is beholden to a board with a US aid guide on it. It doesn't matter what kind of stake is held or what the exact legal arrangement exists. On some level, whatever goes out through that company is beholden to those interests. Also, Nebula has a more direct, subservient relationship with its advertisers like Audible, which is owned by Amazon, and it has to service those relationships more directly than a larger entity like YouTube does. If Amazon advertises on YouTube, they go to YouTube. If Amazon advertises on Nebula, Nebula approached them. Nebula content creators don't even have to consciously think about any of this either. They just have to not piss Nebula off or get them in trouble, particularly with advertisers, but also in general. If we look at YouTube as the airwaves, then Nebula is like a local radio station. I say this because aside from other experience in radio, in 2017 I did a political talk radio show for a local station, which I eventually got in trouble with for criticizing an advertiser because the station works very hard to maintain that relationship. And that is why I am not still doing a political talk radio show. Berrien County and the surrounding area can thank me for getting Rush Limbaugh off the airwaves, though.
That said, I sympathize with Peter here because it's really easy to be cynical about some of the shit that gets posted online. There are a lot of creators out there that post content that's literally just bootlicking US foreign policy, even from supposed anarchists. I'm not gonna name names here, but if the shoe fits, you know who I'm talking about. Even the most well-known leftist creators on the platform are often spicy liberals at best. When you look at the world around you and how impotent the messaging of the most visible leftists can be, it can make you angry. I get it. There's something to the argument that only the less subversive political content gets floated to the top. But the point remains that there's nothing revolutionary in what we're doing here for the establishment to co-opt. The online left had sold out from the beginning, and it's okay to accept that that's all this is. And in Peter's case, he was losing visibility not because he was subversive, he was just being an asshole.
Well, if your viewpoint is the YouTube left sold out from the beginning, there's nothing to co-opt, then it would actually have a total lack of merit. It would be useless. I don't think this content is the revolution, nor is it capable of causing it. That's never what I've been arguing for. But if I'm an asshole for pointing out that the view of, look, we're all just part of the machine, we should just accept it, take no risks, and enjoy the money our wonderful leftist content businesses have afforded us and stop being so serious. If I'm an asshole for pointing out that that's a nihilistic, defeatist viewpoint and that people don't have to be like that, then yeah, I'm an asshole. Like, comment, and subscribe already.
This is an ecosystem full of people dependent on the next level up. This incentivizes them to defend each other at all costs so as not to disturb that ecosystem. This also incentivizes attacking anyone who is critical of any link in that chain.
Noah, the coward Noah Samson, who said that he liked me in a video and then later posted like a minute-long retraction.
Unless it can be used to steal someone else's higher position in it.
I don't believe that Hassan is capable of defending socialism as a concept. I don't think he understands it enough to defend it as a concept.
They're canceled, either for their opinion or for something someone screen capped them saying somewhere. Then, that canceled person takes whatever is left to their audience and makes a counter market of anti-fandom and potentially starts another cycle of consumer lifestyleism, which simply upholds the narrative they're saying in contradiction to the previous. Every one of these things is just that. The skeptic community begat the SJWs, which begat Gamergate, which begat BreadTube, which begat the post-left, which begat 5 or 6 different irritating forms of Marxism we see today. And really, these all branch off in several different directions, and if you ever say political things on Twitter, you've probably dealt with someone who identifies with one of the probably hundreds of anti-capitalist consumer markets going on now.
The point is that nothing anyone says will ever be unco-optable, no matter how unique your selling point is. The actions of individuals in a consumer market cannot be, will not be, and are not revolutionary. If we're talking about the system as a whole, no person can be the change they wish to see, and asking everyone to simply sign on is an unattainable goal due to the existence of highly specialized consumer markets catering to various specific needs and preferences. And yes, changes in personal consumption can benefit a person, but society requires more than hashtag do better to address systemic issues. This so-called Marxism craze, it's consumption. Even what you're watching now, telling you this, it's consumption. Me. You are watching me on YouTube, which Google owns. You're giving them private information, they're serving you ads, they're shaping your worldview with their algorithms, and don't pretend like you're not going to click off this and go watch some guy throw a basketball off a dam, Mark Rober fill a pool with Orbeez, Corridor Crew's AI anime Simone Gertz make intentionally bad robots, or Mr. Beast fill his brother's house with slime, or whatever. No judgment. I know what that stuff is, so I must watch at least some of it. So understand this isn't a criticism of anyone who watches that stuff, or anything. I made this video and uploaded it for you to see, despite clearly thinking that all this revolutionary content is utopian. Converting people to Marxism or whatever is basically just propaganda, and Engels pretty specifically outlines that to impose a new and more perfect system of social order upon society from without by propaganda is foredoomed as utopian. That's what this is, right? If I'm being intellectually honest, if I'm making this to persuade you to think at least a little differently, that's what this is. So again, like and subscribe. Seriously, I want you to like and subscribe, and to support this channel by telling every fucking person you know. I'm being sincere. This video is sincere, but sincerity is not dialectical materialism. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not calling idealistic sincerity bad, at least automatically so, and I do use dialectical materialism to come to my conclusions, and I convey them to the best of my ability, which isn't nothing. But I am a human being. There are limitations to my understanding, and I am fallible. That doesn't render my or anyone's criticisms automatically useless or without merit, however, because they can prompt us to understand things that are made to distract us from making our lives better, to see through ideology. Our lives will improve if we view things critically and act on what we find. That said, no perfect combination of words will ever magically get people to start building a viable political force. If I put out the best Marxist content, the most I can expect is to help people feel a bit less confused. On a group consciousness level, the best I can hope for is maybe eroding some resistance to the idea of workers collectivizing their productive power to weaponize against the ruling class. But that takes a real, socially embedded, healthy community, which doesn't form simply because people with similar ideas get together. And we know this because the idealist communities we see on social media immediately fragment when someone says something even a little divergent. Robust communities are built when people have similar material interests and common obstacles. This helps form social bonds that aren't simply ideological, but are actually invested in each other's material needs and outcomes. Idealist communities built around politics get together because they agree that our current system is evil in various ways. And it's hard to disagree, but it's also how these communities get nowhere. Idealism always gets subsumed into the ruling political ideology, ultimately acting in service and defense of what these people consider evil. The most brilliant and horrible thing about the ruling order's ideological co-option of dissent is that the solution that gets pitched to us is simply to destroy everything and start from scratch. That sounds serious, subversive, and obviously against the ruling order, but it isn't possible. History cannot be reversed. It only moves forward. This is the ruling class's ultimate defense, an impenetrable shield of seemingly well-intentioned impossibility. Further, this romanticization of revolution and its inevitability can also contribute to transitioning from materialism to idealism. If not in the abstract notion of an ideal communist society, then in the abstract notion of an ideal communist revolution. If the emphasis shifts from practical conditions and contradictions to daydreams of what things should look like, then it's going to lead to detachment from reality. This betrays an overemphasis on the role of consciousness and the transformative power of ideas, thus dismissing the primacy of the material foundation of society, finding its way to utopianism. And well, what's this?
I'm a Marxist. I fundamentally believe in the broad contours of historical materialism. What's a vision of socialism that fits our criteria for, okay, this is socialism? Let's imagine we have 1970s Sweden times 2.
Someone's going to say, that's unfair, Peter. You took him out of context. After you cut, he goes into great detail about his plan for socialism. And that is exactly what he does. He proposes a well-thought-out, complete vision of socialism where he has worked out the many details. What was it Engels said about that? What was it? Oh, yeah. That it's pure fantasy that's foredoomed as utopian. So I actually cut out the part that makes it less practical. Bhaskar pretending he can see the fucking future. Shit! Wow, I need to learn how to edit. And I think Bhaskar's one of the cynical ones. He could be sincere, but that magazine cover with Biden allegedly satirically depicted as an angel, where the cover story advocates to vote for him so we can push him left. It makes me not think that. He's the editor and publisher of this magazine. Whoop! The truth is that there is no ideal society. There will never be one either. There will always be problems to overcome, no matter how well we plan or how good our ideas are. But I have to stress that this is not a pessimistic worldview I'm advocating. I'm not telling you the future is dark or that our problems can't be fixed. I'm telling you that humanity's potential extends well beyond anything any of us can dream of. So what can we do? Well, we can recognize that there are limits to theory and knowledge, and recognize that it's not enough to just talk about ideas we're sure we're correct about. We have to get involved in our communities, coordinate with others who share our material interests, and work to build a world we'd like to live in. Our class interests will appear at every roadblock, and we need to be willing to drive right through them to the next bigger one. Where to start? Go out and talk to people in your community. Don't know how? Go hang out with your family. Find some social connection to where you are and start asking more questions. What can you do to help others? Is someone already organizing? Is that actually helpful? Are they funded by capitalists? What is the result of the techniques they're using in the recent past? Consider your own material interests and look for ways to work with others who share those interests, even if they don't share your ideology. And if you're a Marxist, that's a lot of people. The real question, though, is how long is a big smarty with a pleasing voice like mine saying stuff you think sounds correct gonna feel like enough? I don't consider it my job to be enough. That would make me part of the problem. And truthfully, I don't know the solution. What I'm asking of everyone watching is to be a part of something bigger than any one of us alone. Also, I'm asking you to press like, subscribe, buy my books, join my Discord, and do all the other stuff that has links in the description. I'm Peter Coffin, or Comrade Number 3 or whatever. And this documentary was very important.
So come on, let's ride to the kulaks around the corner. My boys brought a revolution, but they really don't wanna call a horse like we did last week. Industrialize and export wheat. Unlike Engels, Vladimir, Stalin, and Ho Chi. And as we continue, you know they're getting sloshy. So what can I do? I really beg you to love. I fight the bourgeois. Now that's my sport. The pig's lie, that's a fed. Oh, launch the Sputnik. Please let me hear the rojo. A little dialectics in my life, a little revolution in my stride, a working class struggle, that's indeed. A little communism is what we need. A little bit of red lines all the time, a bit of propaganda so sublime, a little bit of state control, it's true. A little common ownership, me and you.
Sign up for my newsletter, purchase something from my online store, check out my paint my second bedroom, cancel the 3-ring circus. Fuck, that snuck up on me. Check out my website, sign up for my newsletter, do my grocery shopping, feed my shit. Cancel the 3-ring circus, the fucking cat. It was a good take too. Cancel the 3-ring circus, fix the leaky faucet. I didn't do it well. This is the worst part. I mean, you saw how mad they got at those. You saw how mad they got about the PlayStations. Cha-ching! 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 Marx advocated for the growth of the productive forces and for unlocking human potential, not for reducing consumption, energy. I'm If people listen to me, the content is working too. 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 It's not necessarily what things that distract us from making our lives better. Fuck me. Fucking fuck.
A little bit of sorrow's paying me, a little dragging off to AOC, a little culture war that lasts so long, a little bit of saying that you're wrong, a little bit of calling you Nazi without knowing what fascism means, a little bit of saying you're bad faith, a little bit of forgetting to bathe. I smell bad. We all claim to want proletarians to rise up and fight the bourgeoisie, but hating them's way more easy. Comrade number 3. 1, 2, 3. That's it, it's just 3. I'm the 3rd comrade. Comrade number 3. So that means you listen, that means I'm credible? I don't know.